chilling sound of a child's laughter echoed through the empty halls, but no one was there to hear it. In the heart of a quiet suburban neighborhood, 17-year-old Amber Wilkins was trying to cope with the sudden, heartbreaking loss of her mother. Haunted by grief and lost in her own world, she began to experience strange occurrences in their old house. Shadows danced just out of the corner of her eye, and whispers wrapped around her like a shroud. Every night, she thought she saw her mother smiling at her, only for that comforting vision to fade into the darkness. It was an illusion that kept her company in her loneliness. Her father, Mark, was distant and consumed by his own sorrow, rarely speaking of the tragic accident that took Amber's mother from them. With a heavy heart and a constant sense of unease, Amber searched for solace in the only other place that felt like home, her mother's dusty old study. There, Amber discovered her mother's journal, filled with strange entries about the echoes that lingered in the house. As she read, Amber learned that her mother had been investigating otherworldly phenomena for years. The journal described an ancient evil lurking within the walls, one that preyed on the vulnerable and broken. The last entries warned about a thin veil between the living and the dead, stating that once the echoes start whispering, they will never stop. Shivering, Amber felt a prickling sensation on the back of her neck as if someone, or something, was watching her. Determined to understand the strange happenings, Amber sought the help of Tyler, an empathetic and adventurous young man from her school. With messy hair and a reassuring smile, Tyler was drawn to her troubled spirit. He had an interest in the supernatural, and together they began to explore the eerie history of the house. As they researched, they came across an old photograph of a family that once lived there. Amber noticed that the mother in the picture shared a striking resemblance with Amber's mother. The family had suffered a similar tragedy, one that ended with a mysterious fire consuming their home, claiming their lives and leaving only one child who was never found. Amber shivered, realizing that their stories were intertwined, tied to this house like a web. Increasingly consumed by anguish, Amber began experiencing vivid nightmares. Each night, she dreamt of the lost child, the daughter of the family that had perished, pleading for help, trapped in shadows. One night, the dream changed dramatically. Instead of just seeing the child cowering, Amber found herself pulled into a dark, twisted version of her own home. The walls were charred black, the air thick with smoke and a sinister whispering. "Help me," the child's voice echoed through the darkness, a haunting plea that sent shivers down Amber's spine. In this nightmarish landscape, shadows twisted into grotesque shapes, their faces a swirl of anguish, anger, and despair. Just as Amber reached out to the child, the ground shook violently, and Amber was thrown backward, awakening with a start in her bed, heart racing. Determined to uncover the truth, Amber and Tyler decided to visit the local library, searching through dusty archives. As they flipped through old records, they discovered newspaper clippings detailing the tragedy that befell the family. Each article described strange occurrences leading up to their death. Neighbors reported hearing eerie laughter and seeing shadowy figures darting through the windows. The more they learned, the more the house felt alive, as if it were breathing in darkness. That night, Amber lay in bed, unable to sleep. The shadows in her room morphed and twisted, growing larger with each passing moment. The laughter returned, echoing like a mocking chorus. Desperate to escape the anxiety that clawed at her, she grabbed her mother's journal and began to read aloud an incantation her mother had written, a ritual to communicate with those lost. The atmosphere shifted. The air grew heavier, charged with a palpable energy. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the room, snuffing out her bedside lamp. Amber felt a rush of fear, her heart pounding as she heard the sound of small footsteps approaching. Her breath caught in her throat as she saw the flicker of a child-sized figure standing in the corner, bathed in shadows. "Help me," the child pleaded, her voice cracking with desperation. Amber's instinct screamed at her to run, but she stood frozen, drawn in by the raw emotion radiating from the apparition. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I'm not alone," the child replied, her small face contorted with anguish. "She keeps us here. She won't let us leave." With that, the figure faded away, leaving Amber feeling more terrified than ever. She felt the walls closing in around her, a sensation of being trapped not just by the house, but also by the weight of the past. Torn between fear and determination, she sought comfort in Tyler's presence. She found him outside, staring at the stars. "I saw her," Amber gasped, recounting the chilling encounter. "She said we're not alone." The two decided to enlist the help of Madame Elara, a local medium known for her ability to communicate with the dead. With a worn-out deck of tarot cards, Anon. Madame Elara's eyes widened as she suddenly gasped, leaning forward to catch a glimpse of something we couldn't see. "It's her! The mother!" She stepped back, clutching her chest as if the wind had been knocked out of her. She's trapped between two worlds, feeding off the pain of loss. Amber's realization hit her, striking like a lightning bolt. Her mother wasn't just a victim of the tragedy, she was the key to the echoes that haunted the house. The child was not just trapped, she was angry at Amber's mother for not being able to save her, for letting her spirit languish in darkness for years. The rage spilled, shattering the delicate barrier between their worlds. With renewed energy, Amber shouted into the void, "Please! If you're here, we want to help you. You don't have to be angry anymore." But the shadows around them grew darker, swirling chaotically, their faces contorted in pain and anger. Amber felt a powerful force push her down, pinning her to the floor, as if the house itself were rebelling against their efforts. "Stay strong, Amber!" Tyler shouted. He grabbed her hand, grounding her in that moment. The shadows hissed as if they resented the connection between them. Madame Elara began to chant, her voice rising above the cacophony of whispers. "You must confess your pain. Release your hold over them," she cried. In a moment of clear thought, Amber remembered her mother's journal. "Mom, if you can hear me, I need you. We need you," she yelled, her voice breaking. Suddenly, the room exploded with light. Amber gasped as she saw her mother's silhouette materialize amid the chaos, a warm glow radiating from her presence. "Amber, my sweet girl," her mother's voice broke through the ferocity of echoes. "I'm here. I never left you." The lost child screamed, thrashing against the light, battling against the warmth that threatened to consume her fury. Amber's mother extended her hand toward the spirit. "You don't have to suffer anymore," she called out, her voice filled with love and understanding. The child hesitated, her expression shifting from anger to sorrow. In that moment of vulnerability, Amber could feel the weight of grief pressing down on her. "You're not alone. You were never alone," Amber cried, tears streaming down her face. The shadows trembled, and slowly, the child moved towards Amber's mother, reaching out with trembling hands. The two figures intertwined in a brilliant flash of light, a bridge of hope and resolve formed between them. As the color swirled, the atmosphere managed to break, fracturing the hold the darkness held on them. The child began to whisper, a flooding warmth and light enveloping them both, and the shackles of anger melted away. The echoes of the forgotten began to quiet, leaving only the gentle whispers of forgiveness and peace amidst the dimming chaos. As the light enveloped them, Amber's mother turned towards her, filled with both pride and sorrow. "You have the power to choose your future, Amber. Remember, love holds the greatest strength." The child's anguished cry turned into a sigh of relief as the darkness around them dissipated. In a final burst of energy, the shadows splintered, and Amber's mother smiled at her before fading into radiant light. "I will always be with you," she whispered as she disappeared. As the last wisp of light faded, the room returned to normal, the shadows retreating to the corners. Amber collapsed into Tyler's arms, trembling. They had survived, not just the echoes of the past, but their own fears. The house felt eerily silent, wrapped in a newfound calm. They took a moment, allowing the warm glow of hope and healing to wash over them. Yet, a final eerie thought lingered in Amber's mind. The air felt heavy, and as the silence settled, she turned to Tyler. "Do you think this is over?" she asked, a chill creeping through her. He shook his head slowly. "I think the echoes will always be here, Amber. Maybe they're meant to remind us of the past." As they stepped out of the darkened room, the door creaked unsettlingly behind them. The faint laughter of the child danced in the air, reminiscent of both joy and sorrow, a promise that the past would never fully disappear. Amber felt the weight of loss, but also the warmth of love that turned despair into strength. A flicker of doubt hung in the air as they gazed back at the house. Would the echoes call to her again? Or had they finally found peace? As the sun set behind the house, casting long shadows across the ground, Amber whispered to the wind, "I'm not afraid anymore." Will the echoes ever truly be silent? Only time will tell. Thanks for watching Dark Tales. If you enjoyed this story, please consider to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment about your favorite horror story. See you next time.